how would a tenant start to assess their own lease and their own position? What documents should they be looking at? What should they be checking?
Well, I mean, let's assume people have leases. That's got to be the first document you go to, but it's not the only thing you need to think about. You need to think about, I touched on earlier, did anyone give a guarantee? Have we got a rent deposit? Because whilst the Coronavirus Act prevents landlords still from taking forfeiture proceedings, if they've got a nice juicy rent deposit deed that says, you default on the rent, our landlord can take your money, that then leaves you with an obligation to top up that money. So you do have to think about, should I just stop paying rent? They can't take forfeiture proceedings. Should I just stop? Just think about it. Take some advice. Often we find tenants, they've paid a rent deposit, and believe it or not, they do forget that they've paid a rent deposit. So make sure that your lawyer says no, just hang on a second. Guarantees, obviously, really, really important. If you have given a personal guarantee, you really don't want to be on the hook personally. And that's a great cue for a landlord. If they can see someone's got their personal assets on the line, you do then need to tread a little carefully. But once you've got those documents and you know what your position is, I think you're back to what we've previously discussed, in that you really need to be thinking, well, what can I offer the landlord? And that has to be balanced with, well, what do I need? There are some people who it is the end of the line for them. And if they have one company in one building, one lease, not trading, no guarantee, no rent deposit, we have seen those sorts of companies being wound up, lease the landlord for nothing. And that is an extreme position, but it has happened. Other things we've seen, people agree with the landlord, they're going to walk away and leave a fully fitted out restaurant. So took a lease a couple of years ago, fitted it out at hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of cost. And the upside to the landlord is, well, they've surrendered their lease. I've allowed them to surrender, but I've got a fitted out restaurant that's almost brand new. So it's ready to occupy when we all eventually start eating out and restaurants can run at a better capacity. There's no one size fits all. That's definitely what we've learned from this. Every rent concession letter we've drafted has been slightly different. Everyone's needs are slightly different. Everyone's had to cover different posts. We have had tenants with keep open covenants. I don't think there's any great mileage for a landlord in that, but we have asked for a waiver of them. It's really a question of being really, really familiar with the document you've got, and knowing where you might have, somewhere where you can open up a dialogue. In many cases, that people have found themselves quite shortchanged. There isn't very much mileage for manoeuvre. They've recently taken on a very long-term lease, no breaks. That is when you are really, making sure you have an open dialogue with your landlord. You know what they want. They know where you are. I mean, what I have advised, especially in the early stages, a number of tenants are saying, we cannot continue trading solvently. It is always worth pointing out to a landlord that in order for a viable business going forward to be demonstrated, they need to have a business plan. Therefore, unless the landlord gives them a rent concession, they will have to shut down operations because they're not lawfully trading, because without that rent concession, there are lots of different angles. A lot of them seem very extreme, but extreme times calls for extreme measures. Invariably, it sounds a bit cliche, but actually, certainly at the outset, these are the sort of things people had to consider.
I mean, I'd recommend all my clients have a budget set for the coming year and a growth plan for a longer period of time, and matching to that. And I could see how that could be seriously impacted by lockdown and by damage to trading. But it does feel like we won't be able to be solvent unless we pay less rent is a hell of a hand grenade to lob into a discussion. And it feels like you've gone straight to the end of the conversation if you go there. There's not much.
No, there isn't much. There isn't much more you could do, and I think, as I've said, that is extreme. That is where people have reached the end of the line, and it generally hasn't been in the professional services industry. It's in the less officey kind of environment that we've seen that, and we haven't seen it very often. But I don't think there's any harm in saying to a landlord, "I need a business plan. I'd like to be able to show that in the best light possible. And of course you want us here trading. So, can we come to some arrangement on the rent?" A lot of landlords have been very, very reasonable you know, if you think they're losing their income streams, or at least, you know, reducing them. But sometimes there are cases where there is no way the landlord's entering into discussions, and sometimes to get them to the table, you have to start hinting at, you know, these terrible consequences. I think the time for that might be over. I think people who've survived this far have rewritten their business plans, have, you know, looked at their budgets, and have a way forward, certainly assuming things don't get worse.
But they may not have enacted that plan, or they may not have opened those conversations. It's a difficult conversation to have with a landlord, to even suggest that paying the rent might be a problem.
Yeah, I think we have seen landlords who said, "Come off it, try on." But actually, most landlords, I think because it was such a dramatic thing to happen, most landlords have had some discussion, even if that discussion has said, "I'm really sorry, all I can offer you is pay me the rent in 3 months' time, you know, pay it 1 quarter late, and then catch up next year." And we're seeing a lot of that, just rescheduling of rents. People are hopeful that things will get better, and if they're not better at the end of next year, that then they can renegotiate.